This is the Whole Hog Baseball Podcast, presented by Massage Envy, the first podcast devoted entirely to Arkansas baseball. Featuring insight from Arkansas baseball color analyst Bubba Carpenter. Here's Matt Jones.
Welcome into the fifth season of the Whole Hog Baseball Podcast. Hard to believe it's already baseball season. The Razorbacks will kick off things this weekend in Arlington, Texas with the College Baseball Showdown, where they will face Texas, TCU, and Oklahoma State at Globe Life Field, home of the Texas Rangers. Games are going to be on Flow Sports. They'll also be on the Razorback Sports Network. A couple of late games, Texas and TCU games, are scheduled to start at 7, but it's the third game of 3 on the same field. And so you know how that goes. It's probably going to be later than a 7 o'clock first pitch for that one. On Sunday, they're scheduled to throw a first pitch at 2:30 against Oklahoma State. For the second year, we're joined by Bubba Carpenter. He's the former Razorback baseball player, major leaguer, and he's the color analyst for the Razorbacks on the Razorback Sports Network. Bubba, thanks, and welcome back.
Appreciate it, Matt. Thanks for having me back on, man. I'm really excited about this season. A lot of new faces out there to get to know and a lot of talent out there on the field. So I think it's going to be a fun 2023 season.
You and I sat out there on Sunday and watched the team scrimmage for the final time. You know, it's one scrimmage, but from what you were able to see, and I know you haven't been able to get out there quite as much this preseason, but from what you've been able to see, what you've been able to, get a feel from the coaches, just what is your overall thoughts on this year's team?
I think there's a lot to be excited about. And if you look at it, I want to say Dave said in the Swatters Club meeting, 26 new players out of 39 roster spots. That's incredible for them, the way they've had to kind of reconstruct this roster. And we say it every year, Matt, they just kind of reload every year, and they've done a great job this year. I was really struck by some of the players, how physical they are. So it's a veteran team, a lot of big, strong, physical guys on the team. That maturity is really going to help when you roll into SEC play. But, I saw a lot of athleticism. Boy, I saw some good arms coming out of the bullpen, and it's just, the key right now is for Dave and the staff to teach all these guys, bring them together, teach them Razorback baseball. They play the game the right way. They play Razorback baseball. Good things are going to happen.
Arkansas is number 6 in the preseason coaches poll. They're picked to finish 3rd in the SEC West. That's based on a poll of SEC coaches. I thought it was kind of funny when that poll came out last week. I heard someone say Arkansas doesn't get any respect. And I said, look, man, there are 6 teams in the SEC West who go to Omaha fairly regularly, everybody but Alabama. So when you're picked to finish 3rd in the West, I don't know that that's necessarily disrespectful.
No, I think we're getting a lot of respect. Look at what we lost last year. Phil was talking to me about it. Phil Elson, he said we lost 75% of our home runs from last year. We lost 90% of our assists, defensive assists. Just look at everything we lost, and then to still have the respect and be ranked where we're at. 3rd in the SEC West. Who cares about that? But look where we're at nationally. To me, that says we're getting a lot of respect. And I say all the time, Matt, it's not where you start, it's where you finish.
Being picked 3rd in the division may not be the worst thing. Did you know that Arkansas in 2021 and Tennessee last year were both picked to finish 3rd in their division? And look at what they ended up doing. I know neither of those teams made Omaha, but you're talking about 2 teams that for 18 weeks of the season were considered the best team in the country. And so I don't know that being picked to finish 3rd is quite so bad. Arkansas is picked to finish 3rd in the West. Vanderbilt's picked to finish 3rd in the East. The preseason division champions, LSU in the West. We're going to talk about LSU and this team they put together here a little bit later when we preview the SEC, and Tennessee is picked to win the SEC East. If you look at most of the preseason polls, LSU is number 1 and Tennessee is number 2 nationally. Those are a couple of teams that people are very high on. You touched on this, Bubba. The players lost, but there's also a lot returning. And I haven't recalculated this since Jackson Wiggins' injury. He'll miss the season due to Tommy John surgery. But before he was injured, I think they had something like 49% of their innings coming back from last year in terms of innings pitched. Where you really see a big change on this team is in the field. They don't have anybody starting at the positions where they started last season. Brady Slavens is going to move back to first base where he played in 2021. Peyton Stovall is back as well. He's going to play second this year, which he thinks is more of a natural position. But everywhere else, it's new faces for the most part, with maybe the exception of Jace Borfin, who's going to start in right field this weekend. And he played some last year, but also had a good portion of his season last year messed up because of an injury.
Replacing what we did last year, we got spoiled last year, with Jalen Battles, Robert Moore, Caden Wallace, and then Stovall did a great job at first base. We got spoiled. Behind the plate, Michael Turner did a great job. Braden Webb in center field, and for us to come in and replace, or the staff to come in rather and replace everyone like they did, I really like what they've done. I like the team they've built. We're going to be strong again up the middle, which is key. But I think all in all, I really like where we're at right now. I really do. I like all the pieces. Now it's a matter of them just putting all the pieces together in the right spot and making them click.
And very rarely do you ever see a team that has, say the position starters in game one be the position starters at the end of the year. There are going to be players, whether it be freshmen, whether it be injuries, there are going to be reasons that you're going to see changes to this lineup as the season goes forward. And, there's probably a pretty good chance that the players, you're not going to see the same starting 9, if you counted a DH, throughout the entire season. I was talking to Bobby Wernis the other day, and he said, the infield last year, he said they basically had shortstops at every position. You had Caden Wallace at third and Robert Moore, the Gold Glove winner, at second. Dave Van Horn thinks Jalen Battle should have won a Gold Glove at short. And you mentioned Stovall at first. I think you'd have to be naive to believe that the defense in the infield is probably not going to take a step back, not because this infield defense is bad, just because last year's infield defense is as good as I've ever seen on a college baseball team.
Yeah, I think pretty much everyone says that. I don't think you'll ever see a defense like we had last year, Matt. I really don't. I mean, in college baseball, it was an elite defense all the way around the infield. Some of the double plays we turned last year, no other tandem in the country turns some of the double plays that Robert Moore and Jalen Battles turned up the middle. And, I think we got spoiled with it. What we've got to do is just move on. And we say this every year. I remember when, Casey Martin was playing shortstop. We're like, wow, man, he gets to that ball. No one else gets to that. Well, the next year, Jalen Battles comes in. Well, no one gets to that ball. The key is getting the guys out there that can make the routine plays. I liked what I saw from John Bolton in the inner squads. Harold Cole, I think he's going to be a good one too. I mean, they both have huge upsides. I think it's going to come down to who can make the routine play, because Dave Van Horn's big on the defense. And so who's going to go out there and make the routine play? And people forget that. It's easy to make the wow play. Everyone could go out and make a wow play. The players that are going to end up on the field at the end of the season are the guys that can make that routine play.
Pitching rotation is set for this weekend. Hagen Smith is going to start on Friday night against Texas. Will McIntyre will get the ball Saturday when the Razorbacks take on TCU. And then on Sunday, a pitcher and a game that I think a lot of people are going to want to watch is Hunter Holland against Oklahoma State. Of course, everybody remembers the fun in Stillwater last May and June when the Razorbacks went over there for the regional. Let's start with Hagen Smith, Bubba. They think he's a better pitcher this year. A lot of times freshman pitchers will wear out at the end of the season. I kind of liken it to making the jump from high school basketball to college basketball. In high school, you play 32 minutes a game. In college, you play 40 minutes a game. And so, there in March, you'll see freshmen sometimes, their legs are getting kind of heavy. I think you see the same thing from pitchers just because they haven't really had this type of a workload like they have in their freshman season, or at least the ones who pitch quite a bit like Smith. And I think one of the reasons you saw him move to the bullpen at the end of last year is that his arm was wearing down a little bit. He probably would have been part of the USA national team in June, except for the fact that he called and said, Coach, I'm ready to shut this thing down. I think my arm needs some rest. He's rested now. I think you're going to see a stronger version of Hagen Smith than what you saw last year.
Well, I think so. And I think we saw it at the end of the year. Dave and Matt Hobbs, taking him out of the starting rotation is probably a difference in us being in Omaha last year. that you can see the technology, the numbers, you can see his numbers start to go down. They could tell he was getting a little bit tired and fatigued, needed a little bit of a break. Boy, they brought him out of the bullpen, had some huge outs for us out of the bullpen. But I tell you what, I'm really looking forward to seeing him 100% this year. People forget that his changeup is probably his best pitch, and he really didn't have that most of the year last year. He gets that changeup going with his other pitches, and he's a legitimate Friday night starter in the SEC.
Wouldn't surprise me to see Smith stay in that number one position all year. If he can stay healthy. Matt Hobbs told me the other day about Smith, quote, he said, he's throwing the ball as well as I've ever seen him throw the ball. And I think that's got to be exciting if you're a Razorback fan. Will McIntyre is going to start against TCU. Of course, he came on last year, had that great close to the season, didn't even pitch in a game until April. And yeah, he went to Matt Hobbs and said, hey, coach, I don't think I'm, getting I don't know if this is verbatim, but basically I'm not getting a fair enough shake. I'm not getting to pitch on the mound. What's going on? And Hobbs told me later, he said, you know what, you're right. And so they put him in the game. And well, he really was, I think, the reason that they got to Omaha. I don't know that they get to Omaha without Will McIntyre and the way he pitched, whether it be in the tournament against Oklahoma State coming out of the bullpen, had the great start over in Chapel Hill against North Carolina. And you and I saw him the other day. He had 8 strikeouts in 3 2/3 innings of their final scrimmage of the preseason. Matt Hobbs told me the other day, he said, Will is the type of pitcher that the closer you get to the season, the better he pitches. And I think you saw that last week.
Well, I think so. You know what? I love the story of Will McIntyre. First of all, for him to have the stones to go into the office and tell Dave Van Horn and Matt Hobbs, hey, I'm not getting a fair shot. Give me a chance. I'll get the job done. I think it says a lot about him. And I really love what Dave Van Horn said about him. Said, look, off the field, he's kind of quiet, doesn't say a whole lot, but when he gets on the mound, he's mean, and we get caught up in these analytics, Matt, all the time. Well, he throws mid-90s, spin rate, all that stuff. One thing that the analytics don't tell you is what's inside a guy. When he steps up, he toes that rubber, in an SEC game, or just when he gets on the mound, and he bows his neck and he finds a way to get it done. That's not in the analytics, and that's what I really look for. And boy, I love what Dave Van Horn said about him. When he gets on the mound, he's mean, and I like that about a guy, and it says a whole lot about Will McIntyre.
The thing I love about McIntyre is the fact that, he can give up a home run, but usually if he gives up a home run, there's nobody on base. He doesn't really walk people. He'll give up a hit here and there, but it's the way that he responds to when he doesn't pitch well. There was a moment in one of the scrimmages this preseason where Kendall Diggs was batting leadoff for the team that McIntyre was pitching against, and it was a 10 pitch at bat. And McIntyre gets him behind, I think 1-2, and just can't get him out. I think there were 4 or 5 full count pitches that were fouled off. And then he finally gets him to roll over and ground out to the first baseman. And then you know what he did? First pitch out, first pitch out, first pitch out, second pitch out. He really responds, I think, well to, I hate the word adversity in sports, but we'll use it here. He really responds to when things don't go well for him.
Yeah, you're right. And that's a big part of having success in the game of baseball. And I think it goes back to a lot of what, Dave said about just being mean and being tough out there on the mound. And that's something that just the analytics don't show you. And then you asked, I'll tell you, as a former hitter, I'd rather face a guy throwing 98 straight than a guy like Will McIntyre that's going to sink it, cut it. He can pitch it at 88, 92. He can reach back a little bit more if he needs to, but he's better when he's pitching upper 80s, around 90 and letting the ball move a little bit. Those are the guys that just know how to get outs. And at the end of the day, that's the name of the game. Throw strikes and get outs.
Hunter Holland going to pitch game 3. You got to see him the other day. I really like what you see from Hunter Holland in their scrimmages this preseason. He threw 9 in the 3rd innings, had 14 strikeouts, and walked 1 batter. They knew that he was a good strike thrower, but I think he has exceeded whatever expectations were set for him. I think with Hunter Holland, they thought they were bringing in a guy that might start for him on the midweek, might be a long reliever out of the bullpen, may even close for him. I don't know that they saw him working his way into the starting rotation when they were recruiting him, and he got to campus and he has gotten better and better and better. And now, there's talk that he could be a second, third round draft pick this year.
Tell you, hats off to Matt Hobbs and for the work he's done with Hunter, because you're right. When he came in, I mean, he wasn't throwing. He was upper 80s, low 90. I think he had topped out at 93 on Sunday when you and I watched him pitch. But the thing that struck me is the left-handed batters. It's just they're uncomfortable facing him. They don't see the ball well against him. He kind of has like a sort of a Randy Johnson big unit look to him, kind of 3/4 arm action, big, tall lefty, a little bit smaller, big unit, but I doubt that he'd want me to call him the smaller, big unit, but he's got that look about him. And boy, the lefties just did not look comfortable against him, Matt. They took some really, really uncomfortable swings. And so I think I'm really looking forward to seeing him Sunday against Oklahoma State, because they got a lot of left-handed bats in the lineup. It's going to be fun to see how he can neutralize those left-handed bats.
Are you excited to see Rock Rizzio this weekend, Bubba?
Well, yeah, you know what? Believe it or not, I am, and I'm not a big fan of saying throw at a guy, but every once in a while you miss inside, and I think that'd be okay with me if we missed inside every once in a while. But I don't know if I can say that or not, so we'll just leave it at that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to him. Hey, he's a great player. He's a great player, but at the end of the day, good baseball beats bad baseball. All those extra antics and all that just drains your energy. And at the end of the day, the best team wins, and it happened in Oklahoma State. So hats off to the Razorbacks and Dave Van Horn for playing the game the right way. And yeah, I'll just leave it there. How about that?
There's always the guy that plays the bad guy, right? And I mean, it seems like Riggio is going to be that guy this weekend based on what happened in Stillwater. And then I sent you a picture the other day. He's kind of doubled down on it, wearing the cowboy hat, the fur coat with the bat over the shoulder. It seems like he's really embraced that role.
I think you're right. And you know what? In my opinion, Matt, that goes back to this whole NIL thing where all of a sudden you're not playing for the name on the front of the jersey. I say that a lot of guys aren't playing for the name on the front of the jersey. Now they're playing for the name on the back. It's all about me. What can I do to get attention? What can I do to get more money? And I don't like that. It goes back to Dave Van Horn, the way he plays the game, the way he demands that his players play the game. Look, you can have fun, you can celebrate, you can have excitement on the field. I mean, I'm not saying, this isn't golf. I mean, you want to play with passion and energy and have fun, but boy, there's a way to do it without showing up your opponent. And you're right. I think he's embraced that role, and he's a great player. I don't want to take that away from him, but I just wish he'd play the game a little bit with a little bit more respect towards your opponent.
Bullpen talk. Of course, Jackson Wiggins being out with the elbow injury is a real detriment to this team. They thought he was pitching as well as he's ever pitched. He went down to Little Rock last summer and spent some time working with Dustin Mosley, came back and was throwing a lot more consistently than what you had seen with him, because consistency has been the issue with Wiggins his entire college career. He might throw 7 really strong innings one week and he might not get out of the first inning the next week. They thought that he was going to be more consistent. And this is 2 years in a row where Arkansas has faced this. They're losing what was going to be a weekend starter before the year. Wiggins was going to be in their rotation. I don't know if he would have been the first pitcher or the third pitcher, but he was going to be in the rotation. Of course, they lost Peyton Paulette last year. And what I think happens, Bubba, is that where you really see these injuries magnified are in the development of your younger pitchers, your freshmen, because at some point, those innings that Wiggins, whether it's 60 innings, 80 innings, whatever the case might be, those have to be replaced somewhere. And you've got the frontline pitchers who can replace them on the weekends. Where I think it really comes into play is how well do your freshmen develop and become good bullpen arms by the end of the year. And then I think that's going to be one of the big keys for this team.
I think so. And first of all, I feel for Jackson Wiggins. He's worked so hard to come back. So you just hate it for him. But I tell you what, he's going to come back from this thing. He'll work hard. He'll rehab that thing. Whether or not we ever see him in a Razorback uniform or not, who knows? But he will pitch in the major leagues, and he'll probably have a long, successful career in the major leagues. The guy's an elite pitcher. He's got elite stuff. And so you hate that for him. But, from a Razorback perspective, fortunately, we have a lot of depth. Dave Van Horn said that is the deepest rotation he's ever had. We got a lot of guys that can step up down there and eat up some of those innings. We got some veteran guys. There's a good mix of veteran guys, Matt, and then there's some young guys that can come in and throw the ball. So it's just a matter of, once again, settling into those roles. I think it's important for Dave to his circle of trust hasn't been that big in the past. I think he needs to expand his circle of trust early on, give more guys a chance to go out there and show what they could do. And I think there's a lot of options for them to pick from.
There are some pitchers back in the bullpen. Zach Morris is one. Austin Ledbetter is another, who pitched quite a bit last year. Morris hasn't pitched real well during the preseason. We saw that with him last year too, that he didn't pitch that great early in the year. Even after the season began, he wasn't throwing it well, but things kind of started to begin to turn around for him whenever they went to Missouri. Of course, Brady Tygert's back. How they use him this year, I think, is still a little bit up for interpretation. I don't know that he's necessarily going to be the closer again. I'm not saying that he won't be. I just think that they're still tinkering with how do you use a pitcher like Brady Tygert. Do you try to save him for the end of the game, or do you try to get a few innings out of him in the middle of the game? There's a lot of talent there. Some other pitchers who have stood out to me out of the bullpen. Cody Frank is a transfer from Nebraska. I think you're really going to like Cody Frank. I think that he's going to be able to give you, 3 to 4 innings per weekend. Could be a guy that maybe you could recycle and give him a second outing over the course of the weekend. He's got a pitch that I think they call the creature. It's some sort of breaking pitch that's pretty hard for hitters to hit. Some other guys in the bullpen: Parker Coyles, a left-handed freshman out of Oklahoma. Jake Faraday, we'll see if he can be consistent. I think consistency and throwing strikes has been a little bit of an issue for him, but he can run it up there, throw 99, 100 miles an hour from the right side. Sean Fitzpatrick is a pitcher who I like a lot. He's a freshman out of Texas who I think you could probably see for matchups, maybe get one left-hander or two left-handed hitters out and then go back to the dugout, but maybe you can pitch him a couple of times over the course of the weekend, maybe a little bit like Evan Taylor pitched last season for this team. Ben Bybee from the right side. Gage Wood, I think, is going to be a potential closer for this team. He's a freshman out of Batesville. Also like what I've seen out of Cooper Dossett, out of Springdale Harbor, and out of Josh Heineman from Jonesboro. Cody Adcock is another one that I didn't mention. He's a transfer in here from Ole Miss by way of Crowder Community College. Grew up in Texarkana. That's a lot of names, Bubba, but I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that there's depth on this pitching staff, and I think that maybe they're better equipped to lose a player like Wiggins this year than they were last year when they lost Paulette. And people, and rightfully so, they have some concern when you lose a pitcher, but they lost their number one starter last year, and they end up one win away from playing for a national championship. And I think had they played OU, they would have won a national championship. So one injury in the preseason, I don't think is a killer. I think it's if you have that second injury or maybe a third injury where it can really hurt a team.
Yeah, you're right, Matt. And all those names, I mean, you just threw a lot of names out there, and I agree with everything you said. I really like, you and I got to watch Sean Fitzpatrick throw Sunday. Struck out the side, struck out all three batters looking. And I'm telling you, for a guy like that, he's a freshman though. It's a tough role to come in there and face that big 3-4 hole lefty in a crucial situation. But if he can come in and do what he did Sunday, a lot of times that sidearm lefty can be kryptonite to a left-handed batter. I know anytime I saw a sidearm submarine lefty, it was kryptonite. So that's a tough look that you don't see a lot. I really like Cody Adcock. I mean, he's throwing mid-90s. He knows how to pitch, a veteran guy. The same with Cody Frank. And I haven't got to see him in person. I've watched video on him. He's another veteran guy that's going to be a big part of that bullpen, and all the other guys you mentioned. And Brady, Brady's your guy that to me, it doesn't, I don't care if you're a closer, a middle relief or whatever. It's the guy that can come in that high leverage situation. Your closer, you might close a game in the 6th inning. That might be when you really need to bring that guy in, and we know Brady can do it. So man, there's so many options for them to go to, and that's going to be exciting early on to see who comes out there and can get it done.
And you're probably going to have to see more pitchers on the first weekend just because pitch counts aren't built up. Your starting pitchers, they may not go more than 70, 75 pitches. And, in the course of one game, that may not take you past 4 innings. And so I think you're going to see quite a few pitchers pitch this weekend down in Arlington. A lot more to come on the Whole Hog Baseball podcast. I want to tell you, though, that the podcast is sponsored by Massage Envy, voted the best day spa and best massage in all of Northwest Arkansas. You can visit Mike and his staff in Tuscany Square at 2603 West Pleasant Grove Road in Rogers, or in Fayetteville at 3557 North Shiloh Drive. Massage Envy has services for everyone. MassageEnvy.com.
Massage Envy, with clinics in Rogers and Fayetteville, has been awarded Northwest Arkansas's Best Day Spa and Best Massage. One of the reasons is our care for athletes, both serious and recreational. We now offer rapid tension relief sessions using a high-caliber vibrating tool and total body stretch sessions like the ones used by the PGA. Both of these new services can be combined with the always popular deep muscle treatment. So whether you compete or just want to relax, there is no place better than Massage Envy.
WholeHogSports.com has the largest, most experienced staff of reporters covering sports in Arkansas. Football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. You'll find it at WholeHogSports.com. The website includes up-to-minute news, daily commentaries, and award-winning photography from the staffs of Hogs Illustrated and the Democrat Gazette. For subscriptions, call 1-800-757-6277. That's 1-800-757-6277. Or visit us online today. WholeHogSports.com.
Continuing our preview of the Razorback baseball team this year, we're going to move to position players now. And like we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of new faces on this team. And if you just go around the diamond, these are the players that we expect to see in game one against Texas on Friday and probably throughout the course of the weekend. We'll start at catcher. Hudson Polk is a transfer from Oklahoma. He backed up a really good catcher at OU last year named Jimmy Crooks, who I think was a fourth-round draft pick, might have been an All-American on at least one team, and of course was a big reason why they made it to the National Championship Series where they played Ole Miss. The OU coaches did not want to lose Hudson Polk, but he wanted to go somewhere where maybe he could have a fresh start. And here he is at Arkansas. I think defensively he's really good. There are those positions where I think that you put defense as a priority, as a premium. And I think catcher is one of those. And, so I don't know what he's going to do with his bat. I think he's shown some flashes where he can make some plays with his bat, but I think defense is the number one priority right there. And I think that's why he beat out Parker Rowland, who's another transfer, came in from a junior college in Oklahoma, previously played at Arkansas State. At first base, Brady Slavens is back, better than ever. He got the elbow healed, had surgery over the offseason, ulnar nerve transposition surgery. It caused him basically not to be able to play defense last year. And he feels really confident, I think, and not only his defense, but I think that, and Bubba, you can speak to this a little bit, when you've got an injury, it really affects you, I think, at the plate sometimes. And I think maybe that's what we saw from Brady last year is he's got this thing going on with his elbow and it becomes a little bit of a mind game with him.
Oh, absolutely. That's the crazy thing. Just something physical like that. When you step up to the plate, it turns into a mental thing. And the next thing you know, you're scuffling at the plate and it's got nothing to do with a swing, but it's just something that makes you a little bit uncomfortable. And, hitting's mental, man. So if you got something going on in your dome, you're going to struggle a bit. And you're right. I think we saw it from Brady last year. And, he got off to a horrible start, but hats off to Brady for putting it together and finishing up with a pretty good season. Finished up 260 something, 15, 16 home runs. So you know what you're going to get out of Brady, but kudos to him for battling through it. Cause I know he got off to a horrible start last year.
Second base, Peyton Stovall is going to be the second baseman this year, replacing Robert Moore. Stovall told me that he thinks this is his natural position. This is where he grew up playing, is at second base. They put him at first base last year so they get his bat in the lineup. But now Moore is gone. Stovall's at second. I think he's going to be a good second baseman for this team. Shortstop is John Bolton. He's a transfer from Austin Peay, a graduate student. There are a couple of players, really more than a couple. There are a lot of players who are 22, 23 years old on this team, and he's one of them, 23. I think he turns 24 this summer. older players, and sometimes, Bubba, you get older players into a locker room, and that helps in these transition periods because you've got more maturity in the locker room. You've got some guys who have been through some things, and I think that's a factor on this year's team that probably isn't talked about enough.
No, I think so. And you look at that. If you look all around the SEC, I mean, it's a ton of older players, but I think it helps to have the older guys come in here, kind of settle down some of the younger guys that are coming in, and SEC play for the first time. I think it really does help having that older, mature veteran. Even though it's first year here, you saw it with Michael Turner last year. He came in he's kind of got a calming presence about him. Was a quiet leader. And I think it was big having him here. And I think some of these other guys are going to step up and take on that role this year.
Chris Lanzilli was another one last year who was in that same vein. I think he might have turned 24 the day that he hit the home run against Stanford at the College World Series. Quite a bit of an older player. Caleb Cali is a player who's been around the block a little bit. He's in his fourth year, also with his fourth program. He began his career at Florida State. Has played at a couple of junior colleges the last 2 years, went to Hillsborough in Florida in 2021. There was a coaching change, moved over to the College of Central Florida. And last year he had an incredible year at the plate, was a JUCO first team All-American. And from what we have seen in the preseason, this guy's going to hit the preseason stats, 13 for 28. You can just stop right there. 13 for 28 against this type of pitching is really darn good, but a lot of doubles, a lot of home runs, a lot of runs batted in. And you and I saw him hit an absolute no-doubter in the final inning of the final scrimmage last weekend. That thing was 110 off the bat, and it went 443 feet to left field.
Yeah, I tell you, the thing that struck me about Caleb Cali is just his big, physical, strong player. He looks like a third baseman. He looks like a 3-hole hitter. He just looks like an SEC player. I think it's going to be exciting to have him. And you're right, he's another older player, and he put up big numbers. It's hard to say. It's hard to translate the JUCO numbers into the SEC, but he's a guy that's proved he can do it. If he can hit our staff, he can hit anybody. So I expect big things out of him this year.
He's about 6'3", 230, a little bit bigger than Caden Wallace, but I was talking to Bobby Wernes, and Bobby obviously was a great third baseman. He said if you get a guy who looks like that, you want him to be a third baseman. It's just a matter of whether or not he's athletic enough to play the position. There was some concern, I think, about whether or not he was going to be able to be a good defensive third baseman when he came in. He only fielded 894 last year in junior college. Bobby says that he's really turned the corner defensively. They like what he's doing defensively. He's booted some balls, but he's also made some really nice plays there at third base. And again, it goes back to there's not going to be another Caden Wallace, I think, for, a little while at least. Maybe, the Caden Wallace that you saw in the postseason last year, I don't know that I've ever seen a third baseman play defense like that at Arkansas. Maybe Wernes did to a certain extent, but it's been really rare. But talk about his third base defense, Bubba, and, where that maybe fits into the picture for this team.
Well, it's huge. And, you said it, Matt. We got spoiled last year with Caden Wallace at third base. I mean, he just made, not just the routine play, he made the crazy wow plays that no one else in the country makes. But, Caleb, I think what he's going to bring is, we saw him make a couple of good plays ranging to his left in the scrimmage on Sunday. I think he moves well. But once again, it comes back to, for me, Matt, is just making that routine play. If you make the great play, okay, but make that routine play. And I'm pretty sure his bat, he's going to drive in a lot more runs that he's going to let in. And so we can, if he misses a ball or two every once in a while, we can handle that. If he steps up in that 3-hole and drives in 3 or 4 runs, we'll forgive him for booting a ball every once in a while.
I like the transfer outfielders. You have Jared Wegner in left field and Tavian Josenberger in center. Wegner came from Creighton. Josenberger came from Kansas. He played in the infield at KU, had a back injury that limited some of the things that he could do defensively. We mentioned Lanzilli. Wegner reminds me a lot of Lanzilli, although I think he's a better hitter for average than Chris was. They remind me some just in terms of their older players. They both play left field. They both have a lot of power. Wegner is a player who I think he's probably going to hit in the 5-hole this weekend. I think he might be the best hitter on this team. Callie may have better average, but Wegner, just there's something about watching him at the plate that's really pleasing, I guess. To from a baseball perspective, there's just like I don't know, what would you call it, a calming factor with him? It's a real old veteran type of approach that he has, and I know the coaches are a little surprised they got him here. They thought he might go pro.
Well, here's what I like about him, and I know you get tired of hearing me saying this. Good hitters are defined by what they don't swing at. So in the scrimmage the other day, he was up with the bases loaded against Dylan Carter, 2 outs. Dylan threw him 2 nasty sliders to start off the at bat. He took both of them. They're both strikes, but they were pitcher's pitches. Came back with a 0-2 high fastball. A lot of guys would have chased it just above the belt, top of the zone, just barely out of the zone. Then he came back with a 1-2 slider and he smoked it down the left field line for a double, drove in 3 runs. That says a lot about him right there. Just that kind of calming, just that he looked in control. He was, a lot of guys would have chased one of those first 2 sliders, dribbled it to the left side, inning over. He didn't. He spit on those pitches because they're pitcher's pitches, got him a slider. Actually, the slider, I don't even want to say it was a hanging slider. The slider that he hit down the line, that he smoked down the line for the double, Matt, was actually a pretty good pitch. It wasn't like it was just hanging over the middle of the plate. He went down there and got it and drove it to left field. So that's good to see. And what I liked, I was surprised with how well he moves. You compared him a little bit to Chris Lanzilli. He moves a lot better than Chris Lanzilli does. He's scooting around the bases a little bit. For a big guy, he could run a little bit.
And one of the things that I think is going to be this or different about this year's team is that they're going to run the bases more, and I think they're going to steal more, but it just doesn't mean steal. I think there's going to be a lot more hit and runs. I think there's going to be a lot more first to third movement. Wegner and Josenberger, they both can steal bases. Wegner was 11 for 12 last year at Creighton. I don't have Josenberger's stats here in front of me. I did track Wegner's preseason steals. He was 7 for 7. And you also saw some instances where they did double steals with he and Jace Borfin, who hits behind him. But they both can run, they both can steal, and they both take a lot of pitches. They both will draw walks. Josenberger probably a little bit more than Wegner, and that's why you see Josenberger hitting in the leadoff position. It's going to be a team that really forces you, I think, to throw strikes, at least in those 2 spots in the order.
Here's what I'm excited about Josenberger, Matt, is, it's been a long time. I can't even remember who was the last true leadoff hitter we had here at University of Arkansas. I can't remember the last true leadoff guy we had. And to me, Tavian Josenberger is that guy. He takes a lot of pitches, switch hitter. There's not a huge drop off from the left side, the right side of the plate. He's pretty equal on both sides. Maybe a little more pop, I guess, from the left side, but he takes a lot of pitches. We watched him Sunday have a 9-pitch at bat. Now, ultimately, he struck out on a 3-2 changeup away, foul tipped it, but it was just, sometimes you tip your hat, not very often, but sometimes you tip your hat to the pitcher. Dylan Carter made a great pitch down and away against him. I believe it was Dylan that struck him out. But it was just a nasty pitch, but he fouled the ball off. It was a slider down the right field line, just foul. Took another fastball inside, pulled his hands aside, fouled it down the left field line, just left of the foul pole, home run depth, a home run distance, but ultimately struck out. But it was just a great at bat. So I'm excited to see a true leadoff hitter for us, and see what he can do at the top of the lineup with some of the at bats. The hitters coming up behind him. It's going to be good to have a guy like that to kind of get on base, set the table, and then let the guys behind him go to work.
We mentioned Slavens and Stovall are back. There's only 4 position players back from last year's team. The other 2 are Jace Borfin. He's going to play in right field, and Kendall Diggs, who's going to be the DH on opening weekend. Diggs has had some success against left-handed hitters. There's a lot of guys that are on the bench who I think are capable of stepping into that DH role. But I think Diggs, by virtue of what he did during the preseason, I think he had 4 straight scrimmages where he had multiple hits. He had 3 days where he had multiple RBIs. Really had a nice preseason from an offensive perspective. He's a little bit injured, a little bit banged up, wasn't able to run the bases last week with what was described as a leg contusion. They don't think that's going to be serious. They just didn't want him running the bases and potentially not allowing that injury to heal quite like it should. But, from what I've seen from Diggs, I like the way that it looks with him. And I'm going to be interested to see how they construct the batting order, because he was hitting leadoff basically for the other team. They would put all of these 8 position starters in one lineup, and then they would put Diggs on the other team and let him play in the field most days until the injury. He was hitting leadoff. He was taking a lot of pitches. He was having a lot of success. It wouldn't surprise me, Bubba, maybe to see him go into that 9 hole and have what coaches like to refer to as a second leadoff hitter.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I love Kendall's approach at the plate. I loved it last year when he got in there. We saw him on Sunday step up there. He took a 1-1 fastball, slapped it to left field. He drove it to left field for a 2-out RBI single. Just, doesn't try to do too much. He always looks like he's in control at the plate. And I really like that. And so, he's going to be in the lineup somewhere. And someone that you touched on that I didn't get a chance to talk about was Jace Borfin. I was talking about Jace earlier in the week, and he's a guy, when he steps into the batting cage, the ball makes a different sound off of Jace's bat. So it's good to see him back healthy this year. And I really expect big things out of him, because there's just something about him. I love left-handed swings. I think he's got a beautiful left-handed swing. And so I'm glad he's back in the lineup healthy again this year. And I think he's another one that, we're going to see some good things from him this year.
I think the shoulder injury affected him a lot last year, and he didn't quite hit the way he thought he would. He's healthy now, and we'll see how it goes for him. The Whole Hog Baseball Podcast is brought to you in part by Teague Law Firm. James Teague has joined his father, Robert, at the Teague Law Firm, which has been around nearly 30 years and voted Best of Northwest Arkansas in 2019 and 2021. James can help you with most family law matters, including divorce, custody, and child support. He can also help with criminal law, including felony and misdemeanor offenses. If you have an estate need, James at Teague Law Firm can fill your need there too. Teague Law Firm is a full-service law firm where you will talk to actual lawyers. They'll call you back and give you their direct sell. Call James and Teague Law Firm at 479-531-2785. That's 479-531-2785. Or visit them online at teague-law.com. The Teague Law Firm, if we can't help you, we'll talk baseball.
Want more coverage of your home team? Download the Whole Hog Sports Video on Demand app. Check out the Fan Zone and get up-to-the-minute videos, podcasts, and features on football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. Search for Whole Hog Sports on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire at home. And take it with you on the go by downloading it for your mobile device in your app store. The Whole Hog Sports Video on Demand app. Get it today.
The Whole Hog Baseball Podcast rolls on. Bubba, we talked about the position starters. One of the things that I think has made this team so good over the last 2 years is that whenever it comes time for there to be a pinch runner, for there to be a pinch hitter, a defensive replacement, they always seem to have that guy that they can bring off the bench, or they have in a lot of scenarios. I mean, gosh, we talked about Kendall Diggs a minute ago. Think about the hit that he had against Ole Miss on a Saturday night last year, the pinch hit, walk-off home run. That was really a big point in the season for the Razorbacks. There have been so many players that they can bring off the bench. And I think that's what makes a team good, is when you have those different options. And, there's some of those on the bench this year, guys who were really highly recruited, who may not start week 1, but, we mentioned earlier, they might get into the lineup at some point. Some of the players who I think about are Jason Jones, third baseman. He could also play first base, probably the best position player that they were able to get last year out of the high school ranks. Were able to hang on to him after he was a high draft prospect. Mason Neville is a center fielder, but probably could play other positions in the outfield too. Really good athlete, left-handed thrower, left-handed bat. He was an 18th round draft pick of the Cincinnati Reds. He's on this team. And then there's a lot of JUCO transfers. You touched on Harold Cole at shortstop. Ben McLaughlin is a Gold Glove winner at the JUCO level last year. I think he played third and first base at Hutchinson Community College in Kansas. And we could probably go on and on down the list. Parker Rowland is a real good switch hitting catcher who I think is going to play some this year. I don't know that we're going to see Hudson Polk play quite as many games behind the plate, maybe as we saw with Casey Opitz 2 years ago or Michael Turner last year. There's just a lot of options for this team coming off the bench.
Well, it's a good luxury to have if you're Dave Van Horn and the staff. But boy, there's a lot of tough decisions. But you said it. Who we see Friday night may not be who we see in, once SEC play starts. Cream rises to the top. Guys struggle. There's always someone behind you pushing you. I love what Dave Van Horn said about Jason Jones hitting that 3-0 pitch 117 miles an hour into left field, just an absolute bomb. It's funny. He's a young kid. He's a freshman. He didn't know they were down in the game. He's just up there in hit mode. And I love those younger kids that are in hit mode. And so he could be a guy that he might end up settling into a DH role somewhere down there or get in a lineup somehow. His bat's going to get him in there. I mean, there's so many other guys. And you mentioned Mason Neville. We got to see Ben McLaughlin step up and hit a rocket to left center. There's just a lot of talent on this team. And, I like the fact that they're constantly pushing each other. And so, who knows where some of these guys are going to end up in the lineup. The key is just keep working every day, and you never know where you're going to end up.
Well, but you didn't make the trip to Arlington 2 years ago, right?
Nope. No,
Nor did I.
It was a little icy out, so I stayed home.
A lot of ice, not a lot of power down in Texas that week. Remember, they had to move the games back by a day to make sure that everything was going to be okay. Then Arkansas beat Texas Tech and TCU in Texas in consecutive nights and had a really great weekend down there. It's going to be our first time to go down there. I'm real excited about it as well. Dave Van Horn loved the experience 2 years ago. And he's told me on a number of occasions, he said, I'm going to go back there every year moving forward. They couldn't go last year because they had already committed to going to Round Rock. They had a miserable experience there. The weather was not good. They won a couple of games, but they didn't play real great. Of course, they got beat by Stanford, had come back and beat Louisiana Lafayette, also beat Indiana down there in Round Rock. But they love the experience in Arlington. I think they love it more than any other type of early preseason tournament they've gone to, whether that be Frisco, whether that be the Children's Classic or the College Classic in Houston. And they're going to go to Arlington now pretty much every year. They've already committed to going there for the next 4 years for sure. I was talking to the vice president of the Rangers entertainment venue. They're the ones that put this tournament on, or this event on, and he said that they're already working on Arkansas coming down there for 2027. It may not always be the college baseball showdown. They're trying to become kind of this place where a lot of teams come early in the year to play college baseball. So it might be a 6-team event week 1, it might be a 4-team event week 2, it might be a neutral site series between a couple of teams for 3 games at some point. But Arkansas is committed to going to Arlington for the next several years. And those people in Arlington love having the Razorbacks down there. When they played there 2 years ago, all the COVID restrictions were still in place, and you still had crowds of 16,000 every game. And, I really wonder what it's going to be like this weekend when you've got a couple of teams like Arkansas and Texas that have great followings. We know that there are a lot of fans of theirs in the Metroplex. College baseball is really growing in popularity. It's not going to surprise me if we go down there Friday night for the season opener between these teams and there's 25,000 people in the ballpark. It's not going to surprise me at all.
I tell you, there's no better way to start out the season. 25,000 fans playing University of Texas Longhorns. So great way to start off the season. But I do like the fact that we're committed to play there the next several years. I think it's a great venue. I think the players are excited about it. Most importantly, Matt, you're going to get to play. You don't have to worry about rainouts. You know what you're going to get. I think it's awesome that we get to do this. That the team gets to experience this on a major league field. And I think Christian Franklin said it best a few years ago. He said it's kind of, I don't remember exactly how he worded it. Something to the effect of it's like playing the College World Series to open up the season. It's just good talent, great venue, and big crowds, and you got to love that as a college baseball player.
And it's not just going to be for Arkansas, Texas. You got TCU down there. They're going to have, a lot of fans make the short drive from where they are in the Metroplex to come over and watch their games. I'm sure Oklahoma State will have some fans down there too. Ought to be a really fun weekend. Well, just full disclosure, we're still kind of looking into the teams that Arkansas is playing this weekend. Bubba's going to be on the radio with Brett Dolan calling the games. Phil Elson won't be there because, of course, he's got women's basketball responsibilities right now. But just kind of an overview of these teams. Here's what we know. We know that Texas is always going to put together a good pitching staff. Lucas Gordon is a left-hander who's back. He's a preseason All Big 12 pitcher. That's who Arkansas expects to see Friday night. TCU with Kirk Sarlos, same thing. They're always going to have a really, really good pitching staff. He was the pitching coach for Jim Schlossnagle there at TCU for many years, and has really built a reputation as one of the best pitching coaches in the country. Oklahoma State, they lost a lot of their top line pitchers from last season. I think they lost maybe their top 6 or top 7 pitchers from last year. So pitching is going to be a big question for them. But, we mentioned Rock Riggio's back. I think they've got about 5 or 6 of their starting position players back from that team that gave Arkansas all it wanted last year in Stillwater. I've said this a number of times. I think Arkansas had the hardest road of any team to the College World Series, because I think that if you would have put North Carolina in a different bracket and you would have put Oklahoma State in a different bracket, I think you could have seen Arkansas and UNC and OSU all in Stillwater last year. Josh Holliday, a really, really good head coach. And we know that he's able to teach hitting. And so that's going to be a strong lineup that Arkansas faces week 1. So we don't know a whole lot about the individual players, Bubba, but that's what we know about those teams.
Absolutely. Well, you said Texas always strong pitching. They've always got power arms, but I'll tell you, our guys, they're foaming at the mouth, Matt. They faced our pitching all year. They're tired of beating up on each other. So just getting out there and seeing real competition, new competition. I know they can't wait to get out there. I know the lefty that we're going to face Friday nights, he's real deal. He's got good numbers. But the thing I like is we've got a lot of right-handed bats in the lineup this year, so that could that help neutralize that guy Friday night. So it's going to be a fun start to the season. Man, I can't wait to get there.
Real quick, we talked about LSU and Tennessee being the favorites in the SEC this year. In the coaches poll, the top 9 teams, 7 of them are from the SEC. It probably shouldn't surprise me, but it still always kind of surprises me when you look at these preseason polls and you see the SEC so well represented, from a national perspective. There's a lot of teams that we think could be really good this year, Arkansas being one of them. Of course, we mentioned LSU. Florida has a lot of big-time players back from last season, including one of the players who may be the best hitter in the league, Wyatt Langford, hit 26 home runs last year. He plays in the outfield. Ole Miss is the reigning national champion. They're picked 4th in their division, but I think they got a lot of good players back. Mississippi State's going to be motivated to come back from that bad year they had last year. Tennessee returns its entire starting rotation, and everybody talked about Tennessee last year and how good they were at the plate. I thought what made Tennessee great was its pitching staff. They were so good. Texas A&M, they return a lot of players from last season. If Langford's not the best hitter in the SEC, then I think it's Jack Moss, the first baseman at Texas A&M, really, really good. And then, Vanderbilt's always going to be strong, Bubba. We're going to get to see them some down here in Arlington this weekend. They're going to play the same 3 Big 12 teams that Arkansas is going to play. Just when you look at the SEC starting out this year, what are some of the things that stand out to you?
Well, first of all, LSU, we've read about them. We've seen the videos, all the players they brought in. They really, they hit the transfer portal hard this year, and they've brought in a ton of talent. I mean, on paper, I think it's pretty much unanimous. Everyone has picked them, to be a team that ends up in Omaha and has a great chance to win it. But the thing is, Matt, is you can put all those players together, but that doesn't make you a good team. You have to come together and play as a team. And that goes back to what I always talk about all the time with Van Horn, how he does such a great job of bringing the team together and play for the name on the front of the jersey, not the name on the back. And there's definitely a ton of talent at LSU. Really looking forward to seeing them play. And Ole Miss, for me, it's always beaten Ole Miss, and if you look at Ole Miss last year, I think the preseason, weren't they ranked? They were ranked number 1, weren't they?
I don't think they were number 1 in the preseason, but they did hit number 1 at one point in March, early in the year. They were highly ranked, that's for sure.
Yeah, and then they just fell off the radar. I think they almost went unranked. And a lot of people didn't think they even deserved to make a regional. finished up a 14-16 in the conference last year, barely get into a regional. Next thing you know, they win a national championship, which I agree. I think you said it earlier. Had we won that game, we beat OU and we're national championship. But we're there. We'll be back in Omaha. But yeah, it was for me. It's always beating Ole Miss. But there's so much talent. There's not a weekend off in the SEC. Every weekend you look at, and you just went through the list of names and teams, and it just doesn't get easy once you get in the SEC. But I think this team's constructed well built to compete in the SEC and hopefully have another good year.
Well, we didn't even mention a lot of people think Alabama is going to be really good this year. They've built up a really nice arsenal of pitchers. Auburn is always a tough team. They were in the World Series last year. You got a couple of coaches who are probably going to be coaching for their jobs this year. Mark Kingston at South Carolina. They come in here late in the season and hasn't gone great for him since that year they went to the Super Regional here in Fayetteville. Scott Strickland at Georgia. He's had a lot of really good teams. They just haven't been able to break through in the postseason. He hasn't been to Omaha. I don't even think he's been past the regional round as Georgia's coach. Of course, he was at College World Series with Kent State, played Arkansas in 2012. And so, it's just never easy. Everybody talks about SEC football and SEC this. And I think SEC baseball is as good as it gets.
I think you're right, man, without a doubt. People don't realize how hard it is to go through the SEC gauntlet and survive that. And then people don't realize how hard it is to get to Omaha. I was reading stuff on Twitter when they were handing out the rings. They were saying, well, why do you get a ring? You didn't win a national championship. Well, look, just being one of the final 8 teams and making it to Omaha is a huge accomplishment because there's so many things that have to happen in order for a team to go to Omaha. And look, the fact that Dave Van Horn and his staff and how many years we've been there says a whole lot about this program. But it's man, it's going to be a fun year, Matt. And I can't wait to get started Friday night.
Hey, I sent you this real quick. Did you see the most handsome SEC baseball coaches list?
Yeah, I saw that. What, Dave, what was he ranked?
Dave Van Horn is ranked number 7. We get weird things through our inbox all the time. This one comes from gambling.com, and it is says they used beauty technology analysis to determine the most handsome coaches in the SEC. They refer to Dave Van Horn as the Silver Fox. And they say that he's ranked number 7 on this list. If this interests you, we'll just tell you Tony Vitello is not number 1. I think that was a little bit of an upset for the female crowd that I saw responding to this on Twitter. Scott Strickland at Georgia was number 1. Vitello was number 2. Steve Beazer, number 3 from Missouri. Mark Kingston, number 5. Schlossnagel at A&M, number 6. Jay Johnson, number 6. David Horn, number 7. You go down to the very bottom, Mike Bianco, number 14. So there's that. I don't know what that has to do with anything else, but it never ceases to amaze me, some of the things I see come through my inbox, Bubba.
It's crazy, isn't it? But that right there just proved Dave Van Horn is the GOAT. I would have ranked him a little bit higher than that. He's a 6-tool. We jokingly talk about 5-tool players, Matt, and some of the guys have that 6-tool. I think Dave has that 6-tool as a head coach. So yeah, I'd put him a little bit higher than 7th.
What's that? Charm and charisma.
Yeah.
Hey, one more thing, Bubba. There's some rule changes in the SEC this year. Pace of play is going to be something that is really emphasized. Not going to be able to have as long of a meeting on the mound between the pitching coach and the pitchers. Going to speed up the time in between innings a little bit, speed up the time that pitchers get to warm up when there's pitching changes. And then the really big one is the run rule this year. If a team is up by 10 runs or more after 7 innings, the game's going to be called, just like it is at the SEC tournament. What do you think about all this and the direction baseball is going in order to try to appeal to a younger crowd?
Some of it I like. I don't think it's going to affect the Razorbacks any because Dave's one of those. He likes to play a quick game. Our hitters don't. We don't mess around. We get in the box. Pitchers, they get the ball and they throw it. Hobbs is really big on them working quick. I don't think that part of it's going to affect us much. The 10-run rule, when I first heard it, I thought, I don't know if I like that. But the way he explained it made a lot of sense. And, so I think I'm on board with it now. But some of the other stuff, it's funny, some of the hitters, like Rock Riggio, he's a guy that, if you ever listen to Harold Reynolds talk, Harold Reynolds calls it the dig me. When you step up to the plate, you get out, you step out of the box, you adjust everything, you walk around home plate after you take a swing. It's the dig me at bat. And I think that's going to take a lot of that out. But really, Razorbacks don't have anyone that does that. I know Carson Shaddy used to do a lot of stretching and everything, adjusting his uniform after every pitch. But, for the most part, I don't think that's going to affect us much. I think we're going to still go out and play Razorback baseball and probably not even notice it.
We appreciate you joining us on the Whole Hog Baseball podcast. Hopefully we're going to have 20 of these. If there's 20, that means that Arkansas is playing in the National Championship Series in Omaha. Bubba will be with us every week, and we hope you'll join us each week here on the podcast. You can find it by searching Whole Hog Radio in all the podcast stores. We also post it on our website at WholeHogSports.com. You can find it on Apple, Spotify, again, pretty much anywhere where you find your podcasts. We'll be back with another podcast next week to look back at Arkansas's games in Arlington, also against Grambling State. They'll play their home opener next Tuesday against Grambling at Baum-Walker Stadium. And we'll head to the first weekend games of the season at home. They're going to play Eastern Illinois the following weekend in Fayetteville. For Bubba Carpenter, I'm Matt Jones. We appreciate you joining us. Hope you'll join our website at WholeHogSports.com this weekend for all of our coverage from Arlington. You can also hear Bubba, as we said, with Brett Dolan on the Razorback Sports Network. We'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us.
The proceeding has been a production of WholeHogSports.com. Look for our latest podcasts on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast store. And visit us anytime at WholeHogSports.com for the latest news and commentary.